in this session, we're going to go deeper and discovering a lot more scopes into discussion, and then our great panels will be highlighting on that. So for that, as I was saying, before this, we were talking about the organic cotton, recycled fibers, and low-impact dyes. But what we must consider is about how we make that, and then by whom. We're touching more about the community aspects, about the impact towards the socio-economic and everything. And then at what cost to people, cultural, and ecosystems does it takes? And the central question that we're going to talk about today is, what would sustainable fashion look like if crafts and artisans were at its center, not at the margin? Because through here, this has been prescribed by the team before, where craft as a system, where we'll talk about the low energy production, cultural design, knowledge transmission, longevity, and responsible sourcing. And after that, sustainable as human dignity, like who controls the design? In the previous session, we have one architect from Jordan who are actually talking a bit about the design and then the impact of what design could actually bring forward into impacting the artisans and the community who are actually producing the craft. And who captures value and who get the profit. This is the most important thing. Because I'm coming from a third generation of batik maker, as has been prescribed by Mr. Sundip before, and I have seen how the industry was treated. I'm an architect by profession, but I didn't pursue architectural. And I saw from my grandfather down to my uncles, and then now I'm actually trying to bridge the gap between the makers and the consumers. So these are the things that we want to share, listening to the panels, and then also I can also get a little bit of input, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with some good recommendation that we can actually bring forward for the next discussion, as at least we get the conversation going. And then who carries risk and the precarity? Okay, and then this is the point that is quite harsh to see, but again, we have to talk about it, where the garment cannot be called sustainable if the artisan remains invisible. That's number one. We talk about labels. I have my own label, and then we have a lot of big labels who are actually, people pay a high price for that label, but who created that, or who designed it, and who produced that? So those are the conversations that we need to get going, and the cultural knowledge is appropriated. We have a lot of this, something inspired by. In my version, where I am in batik business, we have the imitate version of batik, where they're actually producing it digitally or printed it, but from the motif of batik, which has already created confusion among the people or among the consumers, where they thought that batik is the design, whereas it's actually on the process. So we're going to discover more about that. And then the craft labor is underpaid in the name of heritage. So being the label of love, and then we have this sweatshop matter of article are among the few things that we are going to discuss. And then the platforms and collaboration, where the procurement pathways, artisan-led branding, skilled investment, and inclusive standards will all be highlighted among the three panels. Okay, and then scaling with integrity, about the incomes, about the networks, about the respect limits, and the value-based growth and the scale impacts, which some of our panels has already highlighted that, which we're going to discuss about that later. And then I would like to call upon our three beautiful panels. First is Ms. Maha Ghanim Al-Sulaiti from Qatar. Please. And she is the head of institutional and cultural platform for craft-based fashion. Later on, I will give them the mic for them to introduce themselves. And the second one is Dr. Harita Kapoor from New Zealand, indigenous and community-led sustainability approach. And the last one is Dr. Sonika Kar from India, the craft livelihood, women-led enterprises, and policy integration. And the main three focus that we're going to talk about today is about the redefining sustainability, which as I was mentioning before about what sustainability was and how it is prescribed after this. And the second one is about the building partnerships, what kinds of partners and what are needed to make things, to make the shift real. And the third one is about the co-author of the future, where the artisan stands in and whatnot. Okay, so we'll go to that. All right, so welcome everyone. So we have three beautiful panels here. I'm the only thorn here. And first and foremost, I would like to get every one of you to introduce yourself. Ms. Maha, you can start that.
Thank you so much for having me here. So I'm the director of M7, which is a creative hub established under Her Excellency Sheikh Al-Mayasa bint Hamad Al Thani, who is the chairperson of Qatar Museums, and the leader in transforming the cultural scene in Doha. M7 was established to be the driver of the creative economy in Qatar. We have two main arms. We have our programming, which is basically an incubator. We work from working with students and young children up until emerging established designers in the fashion industry. We provide various programming in that aspect. And the other arm is our exhibitions program, which is a museum standard exhibitions that we host in the design industry. And it's we work with international designers as well as focus on our regional designers as well. The main, I think what's important is to understand what we bring to the fashion industry in the region. And there's a lot of questions, and I think we were established in 2021, and there's a lot of, I would say, organic growth and change. And I think we were evolving in terms of understanding how to support our emerging designers. And our focus is really regional as well. So we don't only focus on local designers, but from Morocco to the GCC.
Perfect. And then you are actually one of the good representative from fashion, because talking about this topic, and we would like to highlight about the future of fashion and future. We know that fashion has a great future, but what if it is craft to be included in it? And how do we, how is the treatment about that? Because we need to make sure that things are actually leveled up so that the artisan, the first maker, are actually making a good income. So we'll get back to that. And then we go to the second one, Dr. Harita. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I would first like to thank Mr. Saad for inviting me here, and Dr. Dali Koshi and the wider Worldcraft team. It's such a pleasure to be here. Just to give a little background of where I am from, I've got almost, I would say, 31 years of experience, right from industry to into the craft space, as well as education. So in my earlier capacity, I was the founding director of Artisans Cottage, where I was working at the grassroots with craftspeople. I had my own craft and design store, and the idea of that was connecting design and craft. And my research has actually been around design and craft collaborations and how that is an important aspect for bringing in sustainability both for the design sector as well as creating sustainable livelihoods and supporting the craft ecosystem. Now this has actually extended, my research has extended into academics. So I'm currently working in the capacity of a lecturer at Whitecliffe College of Art and Design in Auckland. And one of the things that I have been actually very interested in the education space is building in cultural sustainability and indigenous knowledge systems into the education space. What happened in 2022 was we redesigned our Bachelor of Sustainable Fashion Design degree structure to embed courses such as Earth-Centered Design and Cultural Sustainability and Earth-Centered Design thinking into the curriculum, with a focus that the education space, especially in the fashion space, I would say there is a complete disconnect of the current generation with the people, with the planet, and of course their own cultures. And that's the space that I'm currently researching on, and the impact and the shift in thinking that can come about through this. And I feel education is very important in creating that awareness and that sensitivity towards craft and design.
Thank you. Meaning that the awareness about the future of our heritage and craft will actually be inserted since the very beginning. And then you were talking about the social enterprise model that we would like to know more about that in the in our conversation later. But please,
Thank you.
Dr. Sonita.
Very good afternoon to everyone present over here. And once again, I would like to thank everyone for having me here. I'll just briefly talk about myself so that I can set up the context for the panel today. So I am actually into education since last 24, 25 years. I have done my PhD, which is based on like design process. So actually, I tried and identified different types of fashion industries in India, and I have sort of devised a toolkit which can be used as a teaching methodology when it comes to classroom teaching. And under that research, I've also touched upon a design process which is followed by the artisans. So that's also part of my research. Presently, I'm working as an associate professor at Symbiosis Institute of Design in Pune, India. And, if I talk about, the life of a lecturer or a professor, it stretches between, what you teach and what you practice. So my primarily I'm teaching things like product diversification, design process, and my practice is actually based on sustainability. So I look into most of the aspects, that is where I started from. And presently I'm working on an upcycling project where I'm using the pre-loved denim. I'm just using this jargon because that is the new evolved terminology. So I'm using pre-loved denims and I'm trying to use indigenous method of pattern making, which is a craft, but it is actually lost. It was based on zero waste pattern making, and I'm integrating visible mending using kantha stitches, which is again an example of sustainable craft. So this is my practice, but to build in the context for this panel, I want to talk about how design institutes are there as one of the stakeholders, how they play a very important role in building up future designers who are more sensitized towards towards crafts and craft people, because I feel we are part of different stakeholders. We can't be isolated from each other. So I was just want to talk about one practice which is actually a very common practice in most of the design institutes in India. So we send mostly in third semester or fourth semester, we send our students, whether they are from any design discipline, whether it is a product design, communication design, or maybe film and video design. So we send in our college, we send around 200 students to different craft clusters. And this internship is for 3 weeks. And they're supposed to observe the crafts, learn the crafts, the lifestyle, how artisans live, how do they sell their product, all the aspects of it. So the guidelines are given to them. And they come back and based on whatever kind of problem they found, or they are supposed to find out a solution. It can be very simple, like a branding thing, which I mentioned yesterday also, or maybe some kind of product development. So the entire 200 students are supposed to work on some or the other projects. And this actually get culminated into an event, which is a craft-based event. And these artisans are also called in the same confluence. And students, like young designers, I would say, the academicians and the artisans come together and have these 3-day session where they talk, see each other, learn from each other. So why I'm mentioning it, because that's a small part of the curriculum and we have to do it. But I would like to state here the conversion of it. So when they do this course in the second year, and some of them, say maybe 30 students or 40 students, would like to use a certain level of craft in their final projects. So that is where I think it's very important for us as tutors to sensitize this young generation.
And the students from the 200 up to down to 30, are they from which faculty are they, or
So they belong to all the design disciplines, like they can be from product design, from fashion design, fashion communication, or maybe communication design. So, and
Okay.
they try to build in a solution based on their capacity. They can be even something like, handling social media for these artisans. It can be as simple as that.
That's good, meaning that you're creating network between the makers and the
Yes,
designers.
yes.
And talking about my own experience, artisans have their own way of producing things, and then they would, I mean, most of them, because it actually passed down through generations, and then they have a difficulty on understanding the language of the designer, and at the same time, conflicts could actually happen. But I'm so glad to see. Probably we can hear more about the take-ups from the program.
Okay, so here there's a little catch which we really take care of. I didn't mention that, my bad for that. So since, India is a very vast country and we have people from all the different, we have around 30 states. So what we do is, say, a group of 3 students are going to a particular state. So we make sure that one of them speaks the local language. So that is what we take care of. Say, for example, I am from the northern part of the country and I'm going to maybe, towards the Himalayas. So I am the one who can speak the language, and I can have 2 students from down south who can accompany me. So it's a group together. So obviously I'm going to my own place, but then I'm also making other 2 people learn my craft. They can know about my people. Maybe it can be a simple thing like the food we eat and so on. So that's what we take care of.
Interesting. Because, from there, I would like to jump into the indigenous group that Dr. Harita is talking about. So is there any formula or methods that you are in practice in New Zealand?
So now I'll bring in 2 different contexts, because I have lived in India. I am from India, but I have been in New Zealand now for over, I think, 10 years. So obviously I believe that the indigenous knowledge systems across the world are similar. And I think it's the values that we need to carry forward into the education space, which we are trying to do. So having worked with artisans at the grassroots and understanding how the generational knowledge is passed on, I think that has helped me shape the education space in New Zealand, for that matter. Now, in New Zealand, we have, there are 2 different, of course, there is the Pacific Islands, and there is also the Maori, the indigenous people of the land. So building in the cultural sustainability and the indigenous knowledge of Maori as well as the Pacific peoples into the education curriculum became, we saw the necessity for that. Because obviously with the current generation, the digital immersion which is there, this disconnect which is there between each other, we felt that the embedding of indigenous knowledge systems into the education space was a dire need. And so that's when we build in the curriculum, which has this component, which is earth-centered design and cultural sustainability, which obviously looks at nature, people, the planet, and the cultural component into the course. And I'll give you an example. So when we started this course in 2022, we have this thing called as Talaona, which is from the Pacific Islands, which is basically a dialogue. And so when the students in the first year, when they come in, we have a foundation component, which is like a week's component. And we had a little reflection that the students did. We asked them, why are you here? So obviously, if they've come in for a Bachelor of Sustainable Fashion Design, the straightforward answer was, oh, we're here to make something and we're here to create designs. anyways, we take them through this whole exercise where we bring in cultural practitioners. We have a component of harakiki weaving, which is the weaving from the Maori indigenous communities, and there is this whole cultural shift in their thinking which we bring about. And at the end of it, in fact, we show them documentaries like True Cost, which is obviously the actual bad side of fashion, because till the time they're not aware of what is bad, the good that is required cannot come out. And then, of course, we have we actually show them the lyrics and about cutting trees and the ecological responsibility which is there. So we try and make it fun. I'm just giving you a little context, and then it finishes with a movie called Living the Change, because when we are talking about problems, we are never talking about the solutions which can be provided. And I think that's what the current generation needs, is a direction in terms of what are the solutions which are there. And I feel the indigenous knowledge systems, where we have always lived in harmony with nature, with each other, are so important, and they should be ingrained within the education system. So we have another reflection at the end of that week. And the shift in thinking that comes about, we have these written reflections which come about, and the sensitivity and the depth of understanding that comes through this embedding of this indigenous knowledge system into the curriculum is phenomenal. And I have actually written a paper around that, which I presented recently at a NIFT conference in Bombay, and I spoke about the reframing of design education. I hate to use the word fashion, because fashion is, it is the most destructive thing on this planet. So I talk about design education and the shift and reimagining it in such a way that we don't forget where we are from and the values that we need to carry forward to the next generation of designers. So yeah.
Amazing. Okay, you were talking about the fashion, where it can be something destructive, but well, actually, that's the perception of different parts of the world. Where coming into these M7, I believe, when we talk about the exposing or giving awareness to the grassroots and then to the people from since their childhood, and then when we go into the spectrum of a bigger one, where it touch into the global platform, fashion plays a very important role. And then I'm glad to have you, Ms. Maha, here to talk about it. And then even before this, we were talking about the Art Basel that you are actually bringing in to Qatar. So those are the components of what it takes for craft to be at that level. Then we can actually talk value. So it's no more about how do you preserve this certain design, whereas it's no longer available, or it's no longer relevant to the lifestyle of the current modernism or something. So, what is your take when you talk about that? And then, for me, it is a very huge platform when we talk about craft, when we talk about fashion, and then when we talk about the global acceptance of people who actually have everything in the world. And why would they choose craft that is actually made from the people of Qatar or people of anywhere in the Gulf area or anywhere in the world?
Thank you for that. I think maybe I'll just go take a step back and zoom out. I think when I first joined M7, the idea was to the outcome was to have local brands in the global scene. And one of the things I remember thinking about is, well, I want local brands to be part of the Paris Fashion Weeks and to be able to produce the same way they do. And over time, I realized, why do we want that? And we understand, obviously, talking about the issues of the fashion industry, fast fashion, environmental, social, it's endless, the issues. And why do we want to become part of it? And on the contrary, I think we have an opportunity, we have agency to make a change in this industry. And we don't have to replicate global models. We don't have to look to the West as the North Star. We can create our own. And I think this is really fundamental to how we design our programming and how we support our designers. So I think a lot of our designers at the moment actually produce in a more sustainable way. So we know a lot of these international brands have, 4 to 6 seasons a year. It's fast. It's there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of pressure to produce something new. And initially, I wanted that for our designers. I'm like, well, you need to compete with these brands. But a lot of our designers produce, for example, what I'm wearing, abaya, is made to order. So they have their samples, and you go and you order. So that's already more sustainable. A lot of the designers we work with from the region, for example, work with local artisans. And there is, I don't want to get political, but obviously the situation in the Arab world isn't, there are political issues and there isn't a focus on preserving culture and heritage. And so this is where fashion and design becomes even more fundamental. It's a soft power. Actually, it's more important for us to support these designers in the region. So we have designers in Morocco, we have designers in Lebanon. I'll give you an example. Salim Azam is a Lebanese designer. He was the winner of Fashion Trust Arabia. And his whole brand revolves around slow fashion and working with artisans in Lebanon. So, embroidery. And a lot of this is preserving heritage. And so I think a lot of our programming revolves around that and making changes and being able to create something that makes sense to us, and instead of becoming part of the problem. We do a lot of experimentation. I think this is very important for us as M7. We want to see what works, what doesn't work. We have worked with local artisans, teaming them up with designers, so Sedu weavers, trying to get them to understand the potential of what they do and implementing it in different ways. There are definitely a lot of challenges. I think there's a lot of work to be done to support artisans. But I think there needs to be, or our approach is more regional than local. So we have something called Years of Culture, which is part of Qatar Museums. Every year we focus on one country, understanding their culture. There's a lot of exchange that happens as part of culture diplomacy of the country. And we discover a lot of artisans that we can work with from Latin America to the Arab world. And I think there needs to be more openness in the fashion industry to using that as a way of producing.
Yeah, exactly. Because one thing that I can relate to here is we are in the 21st century where we go more into the ethical fashion. Whereas in the 20th century, I don't know the exact term, but it's more towards the glamorous fashion. We talk about the all those brands, Dior, Chanel, and whatnot. I'm not saying that they're no longer in the big presence right now, but people choose to have that. It's not so much about the branding, but it's about who are actually making it. And then you were talking about the artisan who are actually involved in this area. And I think I can say here that I hope that the panels will agree with me that it's actually not so much about the consumer-led tourism industry, but it's about the experiential. You say that you put the fashion, not products, fashion environments into the area where you are actually putting it in the museum, you are actually curating it. So how do we make that into the focus where the artisan of actually who are actually producing it from the third generation or from probably 5 generations above them? How do we make them understand that it takes this for them to be able to put their products at a very high level, which is equivalent to one handbag of Chanel? So what's your take?
I mean, it's very challenging, I have to say. I don't know if I have the answer.
This is exactly what I was talking about, the language. It's not so much about
I think we've shifted our exhibitions content quite a bit, especially this year. I think it's important. Education is very important. Starting from a very young age, there is a gap in the education system. I think it's the whole ecosystem. So understanding there's policies that need to be in place. So when you're producing, there has to be guidelines of how to produce, the transparency of where it's coming from, but also education. So a lot of our exhibitions, for example, we had our latest exhibition, Amazigh Hair Couture. It's focusing on styling hair. We worked with a celebrity stylist, but taking authorship of the Amazigh culture. So looking at it from a holistic museum standard kind of exhibition. So it's not just talking about one aspect, but decolonizing the idea of Amazigh. And I think a lot of big brands, for example, there's a lot of cultural appropriation, obviously, but being able to voice our opinions and saying, no, we are going to talk about our stories. So there's a lot of education. I think it will take time to be able to get where you're talking about. But people need to understand. I mean, if you can, I mean, supporting certain brands, you have to understand there's a meaning to it. And it's hard, even for myself. I mean, I still buy from these brands, but I also try to buy from other brands and be more local. And it's like, it's a process, I would say.
Yeah. And then about the acceptance of the consumer of the world. I will say that every product is good, but we have to probably go to a step back where it's about who are we wearing and then who are actually making the products, whether that product's actually following the guidelines or following the ethical process and something. And then we have a lot of, it's actually a huge spectrum here, Dr. Hanitka, to Dr. Harita. We were talking about the social enterprise model. So probably there's something you would like to highlight here about what is the rights of the artisan who are actually making it, and then we cannot deny the presence of the curators, the presence of those who are actually making stories to make the value to be higher. So how do you perceive that? And then probably there's something that has been in practice.
Yes. So I'll add that, I'll answer that now. So when basically in 2004, when I launched my own label, which was in Ahmedabad, the idea of course, the label was to have a fashion collection. But somewhere down the line, there was this disconnect which happened because what was integral, what was missing within my work was the connection with crafts. And so I remember in 2004, the first exhibition that I had at my store was with United Nations Industrial Development Organization. So we had actually brought in weavers from Chinderi, and we put in a loom outside the studio to educate the people about the importance of crafts and the value of crafts. Because what we were trying at that point of time was, of course, through education, bring in the amount of time that goes into making that particular Chanderi sari. So when the consumers saw, or when the people saw the process, the value of that increased in their mind. So instead of, like, if it was just an exhibition of Chanderi saris, probably they would have said, oh, why is this so expensive, or why is this priced at this point? So that was actually the beginning of, for me, for that matter, in the craft sector, and also working at the grassroots with the craftspeople. So the platform that got created in this process was an upmarket platform where you are just not selling a product, you're selling the stories. You're also connecting people to the right consumer as well as to the artisan, and also creating this connection, which somehow worked really well. So in 2015, unfortunately, I had to shut down the store, but I tried to take those values into the education space because I was always involved with academics. And so, like, for example, at our college that we have, like how you were mentioning, Sonakshi, that we take our students on a craft immersive trip to India, which is a 6-week-long craft immersion. And for them, the students, that is an eye-opener. It is one of the best experiences because they go to the villages and they actually see the work. So when we talk about value, how do you create value? The perception in the product is through education. I feel that's one of the best ways that you can actually do that.
Yeah. And then you were telling me about the some slides that you would like to highlight about.
I think I left those because it was too late in the day to add those, so I'll skip those.
No
but
problem.
I thought I'll speak about it.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
And thank you very much for the explanation. And then when we talk about that, about the wages that should supposed to be given to the artisan and the makers, and also, of course, we cannot deny the need of the middle person before it reach out to the consumers. In my own experience, back in my hometown 20 years ago, no, longer than that, 30 years ago, I thought of having my very own label, but talking about the products that I want to highlight, which is batik, and batik, one piece of batik was actually sold at about $50 at that time. I was thinking of selling it at $100. If I cannot do that, then I will not venture into that business at all. So when I do that, I have to think of how do I make sure that I will be able to sell it at that price. And right now, I'm able to do that. My brand Rusgara has newly opened a new flagship store in Kuala Lumpur, and then we're actually reaching to the right target market. And when M7 was talking about the platforming and then the environment that is actually created to sell it at that price, I understand what it means. So how do we make sure that Dr. Sonika, that the artisan or the designers who are actually among the students will be able to perceive that concept, and then so that we can actually create more artisans who can actually think of the way that, I'm not saying me, but some of the designers are thinking, incorporating the making and designing and ensuring their products actually, one, is different from what it was before. We have to keep preserving the craft techniques that is actually an heirloom. But on the other hand, we also need to think of what people are actually choosing right now. So how do you approach that?
I think I mentioned that yesterday also. So we, as designer, we always think, that, if you're using craft in your, in your collections, so it's just a kind of resource you're using. So here I would not agree to this, this situation. I always feel that, if I am a creator, I'm creating something, even whatever craft, whether it is the, if you talk about fashion, textile is the main, craft which we use in various forms, whether it is printing, embroidery. But there is a process which has gone in creating that textiles. So I believe that, whether I am one of the stakeholder as a designer, and even the craft person who has created that piece is also one of the stakeholders. So, there should be an equal sharing of, whatever profits we have, or maybe, there's a certain kind of a set system which we should follow. Another thing which, I would like to mention over here is, again, like how Maha said, that education is very important. Like how, you train designers also. And when you train designers, we teach everything, right from basic foundation level to the skill level, and how you actually visualize a product and make a product. So in the same case, even the artisans, there can be a training, and it is happening. It's not that it's not happening. At least in our country, it is happening. So the soul of the art is already there. They know the skill. They know it through the heritage. But how to sell, how to convert it into something which is designerly, can be trained. And believe you me, it won't take more time than maybe a year or 6 months. And we have examples from back home, like we have Kala Raksha Mahavidyalaya, which was started by a British entrepreneur, Judy Frater. So she actually created a course in collaboration with the National Institute of Design. And she created a course for artisan, which was 1-year course. And the skill was already there. The only thing which was needed for these artisans was maybe how to brand your product, how to sell your product, how to do the storytelling. And so that is what we needed. And going back to the example which you gave of Dior. Dior is Dior because of multiple people who are involved. So why can't in the craft sector there can be multiple stakeholders involved, that we can make a brand similar to Dior and big brands like that.
Exactly. So in this case, definitely that artisan has to realize that it is no longer about themselves in making one thing and then ready to sell. It has to involve packaging, it has to involve branding and narrative to bring that value probably 10 times higher. So if there is anything else, would you like to add, or I can open to the floor? We have time still? Yes.
Hello. It's really interesting to say that designers and craftsmen and artisans are in the same level, because for many years when we talk about design and craft, all the time the designer feels superior or trying to help or trying to do things for survive craft. And this kind of difference of the relationship was really put on risk in many cases, this relationship, and there's a lot of mistakes for that kind of errors. But it's important also to show that now architecture and designers need artisans, because now luxury needs the know-how and who is going to make the new luxury. And it is important because if you search who is going to producing the biennales for design and architectures, and the luxury brands are all the time behind that. And it's because they are searching the new people who is going to do, who going to make, and going to be behind the new luxury. And it's really interesting because it's another relationship. Now designers and architects needs be help for artisans. And this new relationship is very important to show and to express here. And also because it's the new way for understand prosumers. We are not talking about just consumers. We have another way to understand who is gonna, I want to know who is behind the product that I want to buy. And it's really important for this, for add value to craft. Thank you.
Meaning that, thank you very much for the sharing. Meaning that it is actually the need or the rights for the makers to put their price, because it has to also follow what is. There is no such formula still, I believe, for the artisan to put their price. Probably there are how many hours are used in making one product. That's one thing, but still. In the case of our country, a lot of artisans are actually not exposed to this thing. That's why, talking about my own label, I do put that. Even though it doesn't, some of the artisans are actually with me, working with me, and I myself as an artisan, as a third generation, I know how much it takes for one thing to be happening, and not only about producing, designing that. Colors need to be designed, composition need to be designed, motif need to be designed. So those other things has to be included in the composition of, in the formula of a price that we want to put. And if there are some collaboration between the makers and the designers, then yes, the price will even go higher. Thank you very much. Yes, doctor.
A bit different take I want to do, because craft has a sense of perennial status, in the sense that it is legacy, it is in continuum always. Whereas the designer brings time dimension. Fashion is all about time. If it is earlier, it is avant-garde. If it is right on time, it is in fashion. If it's not accepted by people, it's fad. And if it goes to the future, it becomes a classic. So I do believe they are not adversarial. They are not adversaries. They are actually collaborators, by which you give the time dimension to craft. And then it moves from utilitarian, spiritual, ornamental, decorative crafts to fashion when you apply design and time. And from there, when it connects to people's lifestyles, it becomes smooth again from fashion to lifestyle. When the Christian Dior or Chanel was mentioned, they took it to another level of luxury, which is the next level beyond lifestyle. So this transformation at every stage is not purely, as we say, a phenomenon of somebody doing designing. It is about changing the very purpose and putting it in a new frame and perspective. So often, people who are teaching fashion or, dealing with this, seen this in a different way. So I do believe the substance of raw materials or substance of a certain matter is not the pricing. It is about how you are able to bring it out with a time dimension. So I do believe that, the perspective which should be more and more talked about is how designers can work with fashion to move from tradition to modernity and contemporariness and make it relevant. And that is what UNESCO's third convention said, as yesterday it was explained, that a craft should not remain as a pickled, stagnant pool of water. It is constantly running river, and that assimilates new cultures, new people, and changes form sometime. I do believe it's time to assume this kind of a situation rather than taking a perennial view of craft and dismissing design as a kind of adversarial position. No, not at all.
Thank you, Dr. Koshi. So we have Maha too.
I think it's very interesting what you're saying, talking about like luxury brands. If we look at these brands that you mentioned, they produce, the couture is about craftsmanship. It's about pieces that are very unique. So at the forefront of luxury, it's actually craft. And I think it's important not to deny that, but that's not accessible to everyone. Couture is not accessible, and so I think, how do we make craft more accessible to, and it's not at a price range where only certain segments of society can buy. And at the same time, I think talking about, it's not competition between craftsmen, artisans and designers. It's how do we work together, and not putting pressure on artisans to be able to do everything, so become business owners, marketers, all of that. I think it's important to place it into the whole ecosystem. So you have the designer, the brands that are successful have the creative director and have a CEO of a business. And the CEO looks at the business side of it, and the creative looks at, the creative. Then we look at the artisans and how they can serve in that ecosystem. So they're not put under pressure to become brands of their own, but to be part of this bigger ecosystem. And so I think this is where it's important, where everyone needs to understand their roles and play them in this sector. And I think there is a shift in the fashion industry because of the mindset shift. Like, we understand the issues that fashion brings. Is it about constant change and newness, and what does it mean to be sustainable? So I think it's an evolving situation at the moment.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more questions.
I'll be quick then. First of all, I wanted to refer to Ms. Maha, what you said in terms of how a lot of those brands were originally, and if we that way. So if you look at those brands that were, let's say, 150 years ago, like Cartier, and as an example, they were, or let's say, they were watchmakers. They were watchmakers. Design came into it from, let's say, a marketing standpoint as it evolved. But I'd just like to share something that happened recently, and I was boggled, and I couldn't. It was something I couldn't get my head wrapped around, but it was a very clear idea. But then there was a point, if you all remember, where these world-class brands of jewelry started craftifying their products, because they realized that and again, it's about market share and sales and numbers and bottom line and how to look at your balance sheets. But something that happened that was unprecedented for us is we were approached by Cartier a year and a half ago to create a live station in the Cartier in Salhiyah to do an 8-day program for them, which was a live station, where we actually created bag charms for their VIP clients. And subsequent to that, we've been approached by other world-class brands to create things for their clientele. So it's a very, very clear lean in to those organizations where they realize that people are looking at things that are more meaningful, that are looking at things that they want to do. And then tying into what you had mentioned earlier, Mr. Amin, is that what we started doing again that was unprecedented is yes, this is the value ascribed for the items. But for the first time, I kind of became a mini rock star, and I was actually equating value to the presence of us within that context, which had never happened before. We've been doing this for over 20 years. So I also think that, as you mentioned, it's really important, again, you know, we, the artisans, were showcased within the context of this huge global brand that, you know, that manifests its expressions in different ways. But those brands actually want to align themselves with the craftsmanship and with the artisanal aspect. And there is a very important value to be ascribed based on these things that have been happening recently.
All right, thank you very much. One last one.
Just a quick question. I like the model, and maybe that's a little bit archaic, of the designer and the craftsman sort of folded into one figure and not that separation. Because what I feel sometimes is that there's an asymmetry of power between, and visibility, of course, between the craftsmen and designers. And that you see also in fashion. I mean, we know Dries van Noten does his fabrics in India, and they make the most spectacular things, but you almost never, the figure of the craftsman is always invisible in the margin, underpaid, and so on. So how do we actually avoid something like that? And how do we create a kind of an atmosphere where this visibility is seen across the board, right? So.
I think what you've just said is absolutely correct, because what happens is that it's something like the artisan becomes more like a labor rather than the face of the work. And there is this huge shift which is happening within the design industry, at least in India. And I would say, I mean, I will also add the New Zealand context, because you know, craft is taken very seriously over there, and the whole concept of including the artisan or including the maker in the entire process and giving due acknowledgement is there within the New Zealand context, I would say. But in India, there is a shift that's happening, and I think it's really required. Now, for example, like, you know, there is this whole movement of Who Made My Clothes by Fashion Revolution. And I think these are the kind of things which, obviously I'm talking about, you know, the makers behind the process, but I feel there could be a movement like that for the artisans, that who is the artisan and who is the face behind the work, you know, and giving that due importance to both. It's just not the designer because the designer cannot work without the artisan and without the support of the artisan. So I feel there is this, like the fashion revolution movement, Who Made My Clothes, there should be a revolution that, you know, who made the craft. And I feel that will really bring about a big shift, because otherwise this inequality which is there is going to persist, I feel, yeah.
I'll just say one thing very quickly. I think I'm a little bit of a realist, so I understand, like, realistically speaking, the designer, the creative director is a rock star, you know, and I think it's very cool to be that. It's not necessarily cool to be the artisan. And I think there needs to be a shift in that, in the younger generation. How do we make it cool? I mean, that's the reality. How do we make it more, you know, lucrative to become an artisan? And it isn't. And I think it's, you know, it's easy to say, okay, this is the right thing to do, but realistically, how do we make it happen? And I think, again, education. And I think the idea of slow living, you know, like going back to nature and connecting to the environment and all of that is starting to pick up. And so how do we capitalize on that so that we can support artisans further? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it has to be a more holistic approach. Yeah.
Maybe let's just one must comment, and it's another question. It's just sharing experiences. We at UNESCO we had multiple positive experiences where crafts and fashion industry did interconnect and interconnect in rather positive way. I mean, but some stakeholders still were quite cautious about what it actually brought to the craft community in the end, because some of the patents, there were concerns raised with specific crafts that a fashion designer has been, it was used by luxury brands for their purposes without any return for the craftsman. And those cases exist, and there are multiple. It actually, in the fewer part of cases, triggered the community to organize themselves better, to organize the crafts community itself. So they created, I don't remember exactly the case, it was, I think, was Latin America and Africa. They created a trust, they created a guild or some form of community legal entity where intellectual property right was shared among the members of the community, among the members of the association and the guild. So they could actually go further and claim ownership of specific patents at the regional or international level. So that's a question to also probably to WIPO, how the traditional knowledge framework that was adopted could support cases like that, because there are a lot of positive cases, yes, but there are very bad cases as well where communities didn't benefit back from their creativity, and those issues need to be tackled legally. And the UNESCO cannot do anything about it, unfortunately, because we're not providing through those conventions intellectual property rights to community members. That's not absolutely the purpose, and it's not in the mandate of our organization to do so. But there are different mechanisms at international, regional level that can allow communities to be, to raise that voice. But also that comes back to the question of education. How do you empower the craftsmen to actually to arrive to the level of businesses and defense of their intellectual property right, that where they actually can benefit from their creativity that is a result of the transmission from generation to generation, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one last question before I do the wrap up, and then we'll wrap the session.
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question, it's an observation. We need to identify the brand identity. Something happened in Africa sometimes last year. Somebody has a brand, a product, 200,000 pieces, but because the brand is not recognized in that system, they had to borrow the label to pay to use the other person's brand to make the sales. So it's important for craft to start to think along that line in terms of building a brand that's subject to the needs of the people. For instance, most products in Africa now, they have brand ambassadors, Nollywood stars, etc., musicians are the brand ambassador. They use the face to sell the brand. So craft time is now to start to adopt similar strategy to make good sales. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So probably that is a suggestion for the World Craft Council to consider. All right. Anyway, thank you very much for the session, and thank you for bearing with us. I believe that I can conclude here about what collectively this panel brings together: institutional leadership, indigenous knowledge system, and grassroots livelihood perspective to offer holistic vision for sustainable fashion futures. And then the values lies on number one is the demonstration on how craft-based fashion can operate in a climate responsible, cultural rooted, and economical viable system. And then also bridging museums, design institution, artisan communities, and policy actors into shared sustainability framework, where Ms. Maha was talking about, it's a company that we need to have all those to be working together and then not working in silos anymore. Reframing sustainability to include cultural rights, labor dignity, and community ownership, and providing actionable insights to designers, institutions, and policymakers seeking to embed ethics and quality into fashion system. And last but not least, these values could actually be contributing to the Kuwait Declaration by positioning craft as foundational to sustainable creative economy, not marginal or nostalgic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, rest of the panel, and thank you for bringing a wonderful morning to a conclusion. I know you people prepared a lot, and that showed in your discussion.